Good day to all of our participants around the world. Thank you for joining us. My name is Carlos Ruiz, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on the IRENA Project Navigator's new guidelines for utility scale and solar PV projects. Before we begin, we would like to share a quick note that IRENA does not endorse or recommend specific products or services within its webinar series. If you are interested in finding out about future webinars offered through the IRENA Project Navigator webinar series, or are interested in learning about renewable energy project development, please visit the IRENA Project Navigator website. For today's webinar, we have two options for listening in. You may connect by computer by selecting mic and speakers, or by phone by selecting the telephone option in the right-hand panel. Should you face any technical difficulties during the webinar, please contact the GoToWebinar help desk at the number provided on your screen. We would like to encourage every participant on today's sessions we would like to encourage everyone to participate in today's session by asking questions. To do so, simply select the questions panel in the right-hand bar and enter your questions with a note on who you would like the question directed to. We will be collecting questions throughout the webinar. If you would like to watch this webinar again or share it with a friend, we will have a full recording available on the Navigator website as well as on the IRELP YouTube channel. The IRENA Project Navigator recently launched its guidelines for developing utility-scale PV projects. Today's webinar is the second in a series of Project Navigator webinars introducing the Navigator's newest developments. The next webinars in the series will focus on other technologies such as solid biofuel production, geothermal power projects, mini-grid applications, and small hydropower. We invite you to join us for these upcoming webinars. For today's agenda, I will begin by introducing our 5 panelists and hand over the floor to them for the presentations, which will introduce us to the background, concept, and objectives of the Project Navigator and the newest guidelines for utility-scale PV project development, followed by interventions by 2 of our guest speakers. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. Our first speaker is Dolf Gillen, Director of the IRENA Innovation and Technology Center in Bonn. Dolf oversees the center's work in advising member countries in their technology status and roadmaps, energy planning, costs, markets, and innovative policy frameworks. Second, we will hear from Roland Roche, Senior Program Officer at IRENA. Roland is the lead of IRENA's Renewable Energy Project Development Initiative, known as the Project Navigator. We are also joined today by Simone Bermaraz, Analyst of the IRENA Project Navigator at IRENA. Simone has more than 6 years of experience in the renewable energy sector, developing projects for power and industrial applications. We will also have 2 guest speakers joining us today. Dr. Martin Stickel, Executive Director and Partner at the German engineering and consulting company Fichtner. Dr. Stickel has led the Photovoltaics and Solar Technologies Division for several years and has vast experience in developing large-scale PV projects. Lastly, Mr. Sunkanmi Olowo, Head of the SME and Value Chain Banking at EcoBank. Mr. Olowo has worked for EcoBank for over 11 years, including 6 years as the head of the SME department. Mr. Olowo has over 20 years of banking experience and will provide us with very interesting insights from a financier's perspective. I hope that you will enjoy the webinar, and with that, I would like to hand the floor to our first speaker, Dolf Gillen, who will be speaking on the background and the objectives of the IRENA Project Navigator and its newest project development guidelines.
Thank you, Carlos. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to give you a little bit of the context of Navigator, which is a program we have been working on for a couple of years now. Have a look at our new homepage for the Navigator. It's very fancy and very informative, I think. But also the content is continually expanding. So we have technical modules online for onshore wind, now for utility solar and for grant financing, and there are a number of additional modules which have recently been added, that is biomass and small hydro, and geothermal, mini-grids and solar home systems will be online in the course of this year, which gives you then a fairly comprehensive package of modules for the power sector. To put it into context, the starting point was that countries came to us and said, we know that we have a significant renewables resource potential, but we have problems in developing project proposals, and the Navigator is a response to that. Solar is an important technology in the overall acceleration of renewables. So today's share of renewables in final energy consumption is about 18–19%. We conclude that that can double by 2030 to 36%, and solar will play a very important role in that. So what this graph shows is the how is a breakdown for these 36% renewables share. The inner circle shows the breakdown for heat and other direct uses, transport and power. And what you see there is that the power sector alone accounts for 44% of the total renewables potential in 2030. And then if you look at the outer edge of this circle, then you see the breakdown by technology, and you see the yellow area on the top left, that is solar PV. And so the potential of solar PV in this 2030 time frame is around 7% of the total renewables potential, and that translates into around 1,800 gigawatts of solar PV. Now, if you say an average project is about 100 megawatts, that means that around 18,000 projects need to be developed. So, and these are really large projects. So that is a significant project development effort. And the growth of solar PV has been very significant in recent years. So we've reached a level of well, we're today above 250 gigawatts, and from year to year we have seen growth in the gigawatts added, and also this year we're going to see growth in this area. The type of projects has been somewhat changing. So initially it was mainly rooftop. Nowadays utility is slightly dominating the total capacity addition for solar PV, and therefore that we also started with the utility solar PV module for the Navigator. A big driver for this continuous growth is, of course, the cost reduction. What this graph shows is the investment costs that we see for projects coming on stream. So this is not announced project coming on stream. And you see that there is a clear downward trend. The yellow brownish area at the bottom is for utility scale, and so you see significant cost reduction over the last couple of years, and our analysis suggests that you will see continued cost reduction out to 2025, 2030. And that is also reflected in some of the cost of the projects that are being offered, notably through auction processes. So this year the most remarkable announcements were a project in Dubai was offered for less than $3 per kilowatt hour, and a similar case also for Chile. Now these are of course prices that cannot be reproduced everywhere. It's a combination of a good solar resource, a market environment that allows for low investment cost and low cost of financing, but you see relatively low cost for utility solar PV also in many other countries, and this is an important engine for the growth in this sector. So as I said in the beginning, the questions we get is about how to develop project proposals, and notably bankable project proposals. And the Navigator is a tool to enhance the quality of the project proposals. And by having better quality proposals, first of all, facilitate the finding of financing, but also create confidence in these proposals and allow lower cost of financing, which then again helps to accelerate the development of these proposals and the deployment of utility scale solar PV. So these were a few introductory words from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dolf, for your presentation. Now I will hand the floor to Mr. Roland Rösch.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Roland Rösch. I'm Senior Program Officer, and I'm working now several years on this IRENA Project Navigator initiative. And it is a pleasure for me to present some of the achievements we achieved over the past year. And when we first in 2013 discussed the support for renewable energy project development, it was clear that, let's say, as a basis for practitioner, a handbook or a compendium of handbook to develop renewable energy projects, different type of renewable energy projects, would not be the way forward. And we in a very early stage already discussed that we would need a platform that addresses the needs of practitioners in the field of project development. And so we created an online platform providing comprehensive and easily accessible practical information, tools, guidance to assist in the development of bankable renewable energy projects. So part of this platform we have for capacity building a learning section that supports and creates better understanding about the project development process. We have an interactive workspace that helps you really to use the tool to develop projects as a working platform. And then we wanted to improve, because financing for renewable energy project development is a key thing, we provided a transparent tool, the Financial Navigator, to find finance for all kinds of renewable energy technologies worldwide. The objective of the IRENA Project Navigator is to help to increase the bankability of projects by optimizing and enhancing the technical, environmental, social, economic and financial parameters of renewable energy projects. Also, we want to reduce costs and mitigate the technical risks through proper planning and efficient use of funds. So the all-over idea of this platform is facilitating also the effective implementation of renewable energy projects. By now, we have available let's say the general guidelines that explain of what are the key things to develop a renewable energy project technology neutral, and then we provide the technical concept guidelines for onshore wind, solar PV, bioenergy and small hydro, which are already online available, and in the coming weeks we will have also solar home system, mini grids and geothermal. I think the main achievement is that we created a project development process with 9 steps from identification to development and then also decommissioning that fits all the technologies and gives you a stepwise stepwise structure in how to develop a renewable energy project. In the learning section, you will find project development technical guidelines, best practice, and examples and case studies which create a better understanding of the development of renewable energy technology projects. The Start a Project section has a personal and private workspace that helps you to progress and to track your progress by preparing a project, and which helps you also to deal with all the type of document templates you need to prepare a bankable proposal. And these documents can be kind of downloaded from the Project Navigator and can immediately be used for the development and the bankable proposal you prepare. The Financial Navigator basically is a tool, a search tool that provides the biggest global funds that support the financing of renewable energy projects. I don't want to go too much into the details of the concept and the methodology of the Project Navigator, but there is a well thought through methodology behind it which helps you to go stepwise through the process, and you are always asked, let's say, control questions to make sure that you follow the guidance and that all aspects of project development in the Project Navigator are covered. We also provide a clear decision and checkpoints that help you to better understand if you have finalized appropriately and completely one of those steps we provide. We have 9 steps, and we make sure that in the first steps you identify the driver of the value for a renewable energy project, and towards the end, so after the development phase and after the financial closing, we provide support to make sure that you basically achieve also the value and that you are able to realize the value that is in your project. By doing this, we expect more successfully realized projects, less stranded projects. We expect more effective use of available funds and reducing the costs. We also want to make sure that the quality of renewable energy projects improves and that the quality can be assured during the renewable energy development process. Also, with the Project Financial Navigator, we make sure that the financing requirements and the available funds are more transparent for renewable energy projects worldwide. And by using the tool, by using the learning section, but also by developing your own project with the tools and templates, we really provide support in capacity building, in renewable energy project development skills and capabilities worldwide. The technical concept guidelines, as we call them, are in general guidelines that cover the technical aspects of project development. So these technical guidelines, they help you to do an evaluation of the technology that you are developing. We help you with the technical project planning and the design, so the components of your renewable energy projects. And we help you to make the match and the balance between technical aspects, the financial requirements, and also the additional costs you may have for additional equipment parts of your renewable energy technology. We make sure, let's say, that you are able to execute the project with checklists and not missing anything, so that we can be sure that the project you implement will be a successful project. We have main features, let's say, that relate to the minimum requirements to have a bankable project. We help you to make different options and comparisons about the possible options you have to structure a technical project. We provide case studies, tools, and also now the first time with the solar tool, we will provide a financial model that helps you to model your renewable energy, to discuss and have a basis for discussion with the banks about the performance of your project. In the Project Navigator Learning section, you have the general project development guidelines that give you the clear process, the tools, the key actions, and the decision points to make sure you go properly through your projects. The technical concept guidelines help you with the technical aspects of the project. You will find elements that are related to land and resource assessment. We will help you with the selection of the technology and the possible size of your project, or optimizing the size of the project, but also logistical aspects, and then more technology related contractual aspects are key in the technical guidelines. A very important part is the section on how other did it. In the how other did it section, this is the idea of this part of the Project Navigator is not to leave you alone with more technical and theoretical explanations. We have online also complete projects that have been developed with the Project Navigator, and let's say if you use the how other did it section, you will find how other did it, so that it is easier for you to understand what are the purpose of certain tools, how you use certain tools, and how the final results may look like. Finally, I would like to say a word about the Start a Project section. There you have the possibility to set up a workspace for up to 3 projects, which you can protect with a password to make sure that you use all the tools, that you can track your progress, and you will then kind of have the different templates, checklists, financial models, and documents available that you can put together for your bankable project proposal. Also, the progress tracking is very important for you to make sure that you don't miss anything which is important for the bankability of your project, and it helps us to understand better on how people are working with this platform. The Financial Navigator is basically a tool where we provide currently 30 global funds for renewable energy technologies. It is basically a search mask where you put in the size of your project, the technology you want to develop or you want to finance. You give a figure about the expected financial size of your project, and then you will find country by country, in the country where you're in, the available funds that may support the financing of your renewable energy project. The next slide. This information we provide with the technical concept guidelines as a key document for project development, in this case here for utility scale solar PV, are also available as a report document. Also the general guidelines are available as a report document, and what we want to achieve is that all the information and the very detailed information we have available can be used for deeper studies, also let's say for universities, academia, but also for regulators and administrators in our member countries to deeply understand the project development process and the technical aspects of those kind of projects. And also, let's say, this document can help and to deepen the knowledge. It is not so, let's say, if you want to deepen your knowledge, we can recommend to read also these technical concept guidelines, but for the ones that really kind of day by day developing and working in the field on project development, we basically recommend the Project Navigator online technical modules on the next page. So there you have, let's say, all the functionalities you will need as a practitioner to have a summary of your activities, let's say depending on what kind of problem in the field of renewable energy project development you have in front of you. You have the possibility to quickly access the toolbox and the information you need, and we provide a menu and we help you to better navigate in your projects, and then with the control questions and the tracking, you have the ideal platform to develop your project to successful implementation and financing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for your presentation on the Project Navigator, Roland. I would like to hand the floor now to my colleague Simon Ben-Maraz, who will talk about the technical concept guidelines for utility PV projects.
Thank you, Carlos. Good afternoon. My name is Simon Ben-Maraz. I will, discuss about the technical guidelines we have published for the development of utility-scale solar PV. So as an introduction, it's important to understand that those guidelines are meant to support project developer throughout the life cycle of a solar PV project. Those guidelines provide knowledge, so information that people can can develop, let's say, a project plan. We also provide tools, so we will see also some of the tools, templates that you can use to develop, let's say, a project, and of course best practices coming from the industry, let's say, to understand what are the critical factors to develop a successful solar PV project. We've seen in one of the questions, what is utility scale solar PV? So this definition is traditionally identified by the size and the type of equipment of a given solar PV plant. So traditionally, utility scale solar PV will start around 5 megawatts and include large inverters and a connection to a high or medium voltage grid. So in these guidelines, what will you find? So essentially, Project Navigator has, let's say, decomposed the process of developing a project into 9 phases, which range from the identification of a business opportunity up to the execution of the project until decommissioning. So also we're covering the aspect of recycling, refurbishing, and so on of the project. For each of those phases, so for each of those 9 phases, you will have actually all the guidance described in details. So each of the main aspects will be described in details along for each steps along the minimum requirement for the development of a bankable project. As my colleague Roland showed, for each of the steps you will find practical framework, checklists, for example, forms, models like financial models, and let's say various templates that can be used in the day-to-day activity of solar PV project development. So each, let's say, steps of these guidelines, where in the next, let's say, slides, I will present what are the specific, let's say, unique features that we have that we are providing for solar PV. But each of those sections, they provide insight on the key condition and requirements to be fulfilled, mainly in terms of technical suitability and bankability of your given project, in the end, to achieve financial, let's say, closing. Very important as well, can you come back in the slide before, sorry, very important as well, for each of the steps you will find what we call a control box. So it's a summary, it's the navigation part of Navigator, where you find action to perform, control question that you need to answer to go to the next phase, and a list of deliverables that you need to prepare. Essentially preparing the discussion with investors and banks toward closing your project and accessing financing. So let's look, let's say, at different features we have developed for the different steps. So as I mentioned, as my colleague mentioned, so we have, let's say, 9 steps, so ranging for the early business identification of your opportunity, of your opportunity. So here you will analyze, let's say, what are the constraints, let's say, potential issues, opportunities that needs to be worked out in terms of project development. For example, you need to understand what kind of land you would develop your project, you know. So for example, are you going to use the land for industrial use? Are you going to use depolluted land, for example, where the permitting restriction might be less difficult? Of course, you can consider, let's say, a part of unprotected forest, for example, to localize a PV plant, but you need to understand what will be the additional work in terms of permitting and actual work for the site preparation. One aspect also very important in order to consider and identify an opportunity for solar PV is about, let's say, what kind of, let's say, configuration my site will provide. For example, it's important to consider horizontal and the level of your terrain and understand what are the criteria that will define, let's say, the successful implementation of a solar PV field. So in the guidelines, we, for example, recommend that the slope profile of a terrain must not exceed more than 10%, you know, and often in terms of, let's say, requirement from banks, they will go as far as 6% as a successful, let's say, criteria for a solar PV project. So this is, let's say, one of the examples we provide, of information we provide in, let's say, this early project development phase about providing tools and knowledge. So in the end, you don't realize that your site or your land doesn't have the relevant criteria for developing the project. So the step that is very important for this is the screening phase. So here, for example, it's very important to identify any potential showstoppers. So essentially, for example, for solar PV, if you have identified land and you intend to sign a land lease agreement, so basically rent the land for a given period, you need to make sure that the landowner will not change his mind along the way of the project development. So essentially providing pre-agreement that provides suitable terms and conditions for the landowner and the project developer. For example, as well, some lands cannot be, let's say, adequate for a given technology or a change of technology. So also you need to understand what are the constraints on your site. So in the course of development, if you have to adjust change of technology, change of site, for example, you will not be constrained to the level you need to consider another configuration, which will take you, let's say, months behind. So this is, let's say, an example of showstoppers, for example, that you need to consider early on, so you are prepared essentially to address those questions. I'm not going to all the showstoppers. You will find in the guideline that, for example, we look at permitting, at analysis of geotechnical parameters and cost of, for example, grid connection, which are very important to understand that once you start the project, once you spend resources, man hours, money on a project, if you haven't checked that your configuration is not suitable, you will find problem that could, let's say, stop your project. So very important. So once you have screened, let's say, your opportunity, so essentially here you have to let's say, perform an assessment of what will be the configuration you're going to design. So essentially you need to determine the value of your given project and analyze all the activities required to implement the project. So here, the work is related to technical, social, environmental evaluation, for which in the Navigator we provide some tools. So the tools are in the form of Excel sheets, for example, where we can provide matrices to evaluate certain opportunities and, let's say, rank different configuration. So in terms, for example, of land configuration, we provide a template where you can rank different configurations. So, and at the end, the configuration that can be, or that we recommend that is, let's say, favorable, exceed a value of 200, you know, so it's let's say some point that you assign for different criteria, and in the end a configuration that has more than 200 points given different weight of criteria can be, go on. In the assessment phase for solar PV, it's very important to analyze the resource. So the key criteria for solar PV is the global horizontal irradiation, okay, which is, let's say, the sum of the direct normal irradiation and the diffuse horizontal irradiation. So in this assessment phase, so we are still early on in the development. So you need to, let's say, evaluate what kind of resources, what kind of, let's say, mapping tools you have available to have a high-level estimation of the potential. This will essentially guide the discussion, the decision with the overall stakeholders of the project. So for this, for example, IRENA is providing the IRENA Global Atlas, where you can find, let's say, a lot of, let's say, analysis layers of solar resource across the globe. Also, NASA is providing very useful tools. PVGs as well from the European Commission is interesting, and more countries are publishing solar atlas that you can find either by, let's say, asking to relevant ministries or online. We always recommend as well to, let's say, complement this analysis, which will be high-level satellite, with on-site ground measurements. So essentially the combination of satellite data with a campaign of on-site measurement will provide this high quality information that your investors, financier will require. So you will find in the guideline that, for example, a well-maintained, let's say, sensors on an on-site ground measurement meteor station can measure the solar resource with an accuracy of ±3 to 5%, you know. So this is already very granular in terms of quality, but you need to implement maintenance procedures. So in the end, when you're going to measure for 1 year, 2 years your resource, you are certain about, let's say, the value, the potential of your site. And for many of the projects that have been implemented that we have looked at, sometimes the resource of the project was not properly assessed. So we always recommend that during the assessment phase, there is a thorough evaluation of the potential of the solar resource. Very also important are the site technical assessments. So here about, of course, meteo factors, but as well infrastructure factors. For example, do I have a substation? Do I have a means to connect to a grid? You know, very important. We have defined utility scale solar PV as, let's say, a project connected to the grid. So do I have an available substation, or do I understand the process to connect to them? What is the distance? Often, let's say, the distance to the substation also will increase the investment required for the project, you know. Also look at roads. What are the roads, let's say, that access my site? What are, let's say, my utilities intake, water, electricity, and so on? What are my distance to a port, for example? Because you have to think early on about logistical issues for preparing the implementation, because essentially all those information you're going to develop are going to inform the discussion you will have with investors and banks that will nonetheless will always ask those questions, because they want to know that you have mitigated all the potential risk on the project. So again here, for each of these assessment activities, we have developed some tools. We are providing those tools online on the IRENA Project Navigator platform. So assessment, as I explained, very important, because it will essentially convince also your team and all the stakeholders that you have involved to go ahead, let's say, in the project development phase. Selection, so essentially here, we can call it a milestone. So here at this stage, the usual objective of the site selection is oriented toward selecting a project configuration that has the maximum output in terms of power production at the minimal cost and also the minimal social and environmental impacts. Very important. It will ease up permitting activities, and at the end, it will also reassure all the, let's say, financing partners in your project. So selection, I would say, very also we provide some tools, site selection tools that enable you to have a discussion if you have a team of developers, if you are a private company or in a ministry, to understand what are the factors upon which you're going to decide, let's say, to go ahead with the project. The last, let's say, two steps I'm going to talk today are nonetheless the most important stage, because you are getting closer to this very important meeting with your investors and the banks, So here, very important that during pre-development and development phase, you establish all the project requirements, all the documentation, all the concept notes, all the activities that provide the basis so other people can evaluate your project. So very important here. Essentially, you have to look at technology evaluation. So how did I choose, let's say, the different equipments in my plants? We're talking about the PV modules, crystalline or thin film, for example. We're looking at how did I design my plant, so establishing a preliminary conceptual design of the plant. Actually understand, let's say, based on previous assessments. So during assessment, we have, let's say, have a gross evaluation of both solar resource and of course yield. But here you need to understand, okay, can I generate hourly a power production value based on a P50 resource analysis? So here, because those are the questions that technical engineers, technical consulting engineer will ask when they represent banks or investors. Of course, you need to implement, so carry on all the environmental studies. So those are very important, and we go into detail into Navigator to explain you what are, let's say, the processes involved in acquiring those permitting. Also very important as well, prepare, let's say, the discussion. So cost estimation of your project. So here you need to have, let's say, after your technical design, technology evaluation, you need to have to gather all the information, so quotation and so on, that will convince other parties that you have understood, that you manage the cost estimation of your project, And for the pre-development, you will be able to draft a preliminary financial model with an estimate of revenues and, let's say, cash flows out of your project, This is important also to prepare the more, let's say, specific and detailed information that will be part of the final financial model. Just a few nuggets, I would say, on, let's say, this pre-development. So, for example, in the technology evaluation, we look at what are the degradation factor of solar PV modules. So, for example, we are looking at, let's say, traditional crystalline modules, which have, let's say, different degradation factors because they suffer power losses like delaminations of layers, failures in cell interconnection, or water intrusion. So based on those, let's say, physical factors, we are providing some estimate of degradation curves, and you can find degradation curves that range, for example, for mono CSI modules between 0.25% to 0.8% per year after LID, which is light degradation. So here also we're providing information about physical factor that will impact at the end the guarantees or the discussion you will have with module suppliers to negotiate your guarantees and so on, because in the end the models will depend also on those information. So you will find a lot of information about monocrystalline, polycrystalline, thin film, different curves, let's say, of degradation. Also, we look at thermal degradation because, of course, we're looking at projects, as Mr. Gillen explained, are in different locations. So, for example, if you have a center temperature of 60 degrees, that can happen in the desert area, the actual power output compared to the traditional standard 25 degrees Celsius will be 16% lower. Okay, so essentially, if you didn't take into account thermal behavior for estimating the performance of your project, your technical engineers from the banks, they will degrade your power output by more than 16%. So very important we provide this. Also very important, it was mentioned in the introduction. We look at standard, let's say, for solar PV. Yeah. So I will go a bit faster because, of course, we have a lot of information available on the solar PV guidelines. So, for example, we provide recommendation on plant arrangement, plant optimization, dealing with soiling, shading issues, for example. We also explain in simple terms, let's say, the performance ratio questions, and also looking at capacity factor. So how those values will in the end translate into financial returns. As I explained, we look at permitting, so the different permitting process by international or multilateral organization, World Bank, EIB, and so on. You can find all the links and information on the guidelines. And we also provide guidance to obtain permit like land use permit, building permit, grid connection permit, or operation and license. So at the end, I will close on this very important. You are, can you come back in the lab? So you are working often in a long time toward, let's say, this final stage, which is the development stage, that at the end of this stage should arrive the financial closing. So here in the guidelines, we provide very important information for the developers to prepare this stage of financial closing. So essentially defining what is bankability. So because bankability, if you look at it in a traditional sense, this is when the project IRR is more than the cost of capital, you know. So, but of course, certain investors, certain lenders will have its own criteria to judge if a project is bankable. And the job of the developer is to prepare all, let's say, the discussion topic that will arise from do I want to invest in this project or do I want to finance this project? So we look at general bankability requirements and specific bankability requirements, looking at project technology, location, type of contract, permitting, investment, and project structure, and sorry, and let's say we provide recommendation that, and also we say that traditional specific bankability criteria for solar PV technology will be: do my partners have references of existing project? Do I have all performance and certificate in terms of norms and standards? Do I understand how my modules, my technology will behave in time, you know? So do I have PID, LID effects? Did I involve independent tests to manage those? And do I understand the warranty requirement? So this question translates, very important, in the last part of what we're covering, is the contractual guidelines and the risk management activities. So Navigator provides, let's say, quite detailed guidelines for 5 types of agreements. The first one is land lease agreement. The second one is a very important topic, of course, but we cannot cover everything, but it's power purchase agreement, so PPA. And we also provide guidelines for EPC, O&M, and let's say one important as well, module supply agreement. So in those guidelines, you will find, let's say, what is the structure of a contract, what is the scope of work, how, let's say, do I draft the technical specification, what are the traditional milestone and completion dates, how do I structure my price and how do I pay my contractor based on progress? How do I prepare acceptance procedures and provide guarantees that are commensurate to the size of the project? And how do I prepare the negotiation for, let's say, liquidated damages, project bonds, and so on? That will be important, a piece of documentation that will be required to close your project. And we do it for the EPC contract, for the O&M contract, looking at preventive and corrective maintenance protocols. And all those needs to be inputted into a financial model. So we provide, in a first step, recommendation on modeling, so understanding what are the different parameters investors and banks look. So investor will look at IRR and banks will look at DSCR. How much are you covered in terms of those ratios? We provide example of how can you conduct stress scenario on these parameters, and how do you optimize your return? The last one is the risk, let's say, traditional risk mitigation procedures. So we look at the different risks in terms of development, construction, and operation of the project. And all those information are very important to be used in what Roland, my colleague, mentioned in the standard project phases that will help you to build step by step your project proposal. I have many more information to provide, but everything is available online. You also have our contacts in the invitation of the webinar, so feel free to ask. And I will stop here to be able, so our guest speaker can also share the experience in the context of bankability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon, for your presentation. I would like now to hand the floor to Mr. Martin Stickel from the engineering and consulting company Fitchner. Please go ahead, Martin.
Yes, thank you very much to the IRENA team for all the hard work and fruitful efforts you put into this field and the PV development of for renewable energy development projects in general. Of course, thanks also for involving us into the elaboration of the technical guideline and today's webinar. We have enjoyed very much to bring to the table our global experience as an engineering and advisory company. Very briefly, we have done now substantially more than 400 PV projects worldwide, more than 50 gigawatt of installed capacity, maybe more than 200 lenders engineering projects, 20 owners engineering projects, several studies, and we have also been involved in the ongoing projects in Middle East. Mr. Gielen just mentioned the $3 and tariff for the project in Dubai. We have a similar project ongoing in Abu Dhabi at the moment with even slightly lower tariffs. We have ongoing a number of PV hybrid projects, and to have similar teams and track records for concentrated solar power and wind and other renewable energies, working from our head offices here in Germany, but also worldwide. Before I come to the real content, I think I'd like to very briefly, in a few sentences, outline the big achievements the PV sector actually already have been able to realize. The sector has been going through a steep learning curve while implementing the first large-scale projects. When we started with it, with the PV business about 10 years ago, we were at costs at, say, between $6 and $9 US per watt installed capacity. We are nowadays at substantially below $1 US, and as Mr. Gielen mentioned, the $3 US are now not the lowest anymore in the market. I think it's important there to set the right incentives and to put the right companies into competition. Throughout the learning curve, I think one of the big parts was for the PV companies, often small companies, understanding PV to liaise with large companies understanding utility scale projects for both project finance and project management and implementation in general, but also for things like high voltage grid connection and grid integration, which still is often a big challenge in the implementation of PV projects, as Simon also just mentioned. I think in this regard we often face limited understanding and a certain reluctance of grid operators to integrate fluctuating renewable energy such as PV in general, and often the grid codes are not really appropriate for such new energy sources. Sometimes it's not only difficult to comply with the requirements, for example with regards to primary and secondary reserve, but even the grid code requirements can be set in a way that they destabilize the grid. For example, in the context of low voltage right-through requirements combined to a requirement that the PV plants have to switch off at a certain voltage level, say at 100%, 10% of the nominal voltage, so that after fault clearance often the PV plant actually would destabilize the grid operation. So it's important to set the requirements correctly, which can be done, but it requests a certain knowledge and certain exchange among all parties involved. And for that reason, I think the Project Navigator really contributes to sound project development and provides good understanding for many of the parties, for developers, but also for utilities and other third parties. So there's a very holistic view on PV projects, which is really very beneficial. Of course, due to the characteristic of the photovoltaics, photovoltaic is extremely modular. So you use from a very small solar home system up to a 1 gigawatt PV plant, actually the same modules. Mounting structures are extremely modular devices, inverters as well. So it is important to really get things right from the very beginning, and this also underlines the importance of the let's say front-loaded engineering approach of the Navigator. Here you see a very few examples. One at the top left picture seems not really critical, but shows already after 1 year of operation electrochemical corrosion due to an inappropriate combination of materials. In our experience, in our practice, we have seen projects with costs in the 6 digits, a couple of $100,000, just costs for implementing after the plant had been completed, washers to avoid electrochemical corrosion. Then you see module misalignments or erosion on the ground, misalignments for losing power generation as at the lower right side, which also causes certain stress on the bypass diodes and on other elements in the plant design. So getting a sound design, a conscious decision on design criteria, a conscious selection of materials and components is of utmost importance. And then throughout the construction, of course, this has to quality management and quality control has to be maintained. You see at the bottom left side a thermographic picture of a connection of of DC cables where you see that the crimping hasn't been done properly, and you have temperatures up to 150 degrees in the connection at the connection point. So this, of course, comprises respective risks, which also need to be avoided, and people need to be aware of such points in order to do things, as I said, right from the beginning in a correct manner. So can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. From our experience now, when we look at projects as a lender's technical advisor or as an advisor to investors, we see that often the quality of projects proposals are low or lower than they actually could be. So the project development work is not really done in an efficient manner, and the Project Navigator helps here to set the priorities in a better way. Often we see there's a lot of efforts put into securing land, for example, to secure permits, but without having a clear view on what is the constructability and what are the project economics. Likewise, I think it is important for project developers to have a well-thought structure and presentation of solar projects, which makes it easier to attract partners and to secure financing. Often developers are not in a position to respond to the most obvious questions that lenders, investors, EPC contractors or the general public may have, and the Project Navigator addresses the key points that need to be considered in a project development. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, this also relates to the improvement of bankability prospects. It is important for developers to know what is typical in the market, like what are typical guarantee values, what are typical yields, how are yield simulations done, what are information sources that are considered to be reliable, and what is typically available in terms of information and documentation at which stage of the project development. Also for that, I think the Project Navigator gives a lot of guidance. Then last but not least, I think it's important to prioritize along the project development the tasks that need to be done. So it's important to know when do we know there's an EPC contractor to be on board, when do we have to have a supplier on board in the process of project development, and by this by the guidance the Navigator provides, such work streams can be done in parallel, and to a certain extent also can be standardized throughout an entire project portfolio. So we hope that in that sense the project technical guideline, the Project Navigator as a whole, provides a lot of fruitful and suitable input for developers and utilities in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for your very nice presentation. I would like to now hand the floor to our final speaker, Mr. Sunkanmi Olowo from EcoBank. Please go ahead, Mr. Olowo.
Okay. Good day, everyone. I will be presenting on making solar financing available to majority of project developers and the issues that we have in banking to be able to present a bankable project. I work for EcoBank, so I won't be speaking a lot about the background of EcoBank and the sustainability commitment of the bank to renewable energy. So in order to save time, I will go straight into the key issues that we have in financing renewable energy. Now, one of the key issues, the way I will do it, the presentation, is that I will go through the challenges as a slide, which is the slide we're looking at right now. And after the challenges, I will go into some of those points that can make a project succeed when you are trying to access financing from the bank. Now, one of the key issues, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, is that a whole lot of players in this segment, they are relatively new, and you really don't have people who combine capacity with industry knowledge. And this is very, very important. And inadequate knowledge is also a key issue. And apart from the players, you also have bankers who do not have enough information and understanding about this segment. And one thing you discover with bankers is that if they do not understand a project, they will not go into it. So one of the key things that we need to do is we also need to get education of bankers to be able to understand renewable energy and to be comfortable. Not many of us really understand that industry. So you discover that a potential project developer comes in, he will first need to explain to the banker what renewable energy is, what are the key issues, and in doing that, you're not likely going to get a yes from such a banker. And you also have the issue of standard. Why quite a lot of many organizations are trying to bring up standards, you do not have a standard that a banker can easily check and say, oh, if I'm deploying, say, a 5 megawatts of energy using solar, what and what am I supposed to check? We've had some of these coming from the Navigator and from some other practitioners. I will mention that later in this presentation. One other key issue is availability of long-term finance. If you want a bank to finance renewable energy from the balance sheet of the bank, you really need to have access to long-term finance. Now, absence of long-term finance could be a key issue. There's some funding out there that could be used along this area, which we will be able to also discuss as time goes on. You also need a project that is well thought out, and because in this part you have so many failed projects, either because of the design, either because of the conceptualization, there's a need to be able to tile in all the knots at the beginning so that you're sure that your project will get a yes by the time it is presented for financing. Now I will go to the key considerations that you have in financing renewable energy. Some of these issues, maybe I may not really repeat them because previous presenters have mentioned them in terms of clean energy, sustainability consideration, the carbon credit, the issue of grant or rebate, and fiscal incentives, which are very key in the developing economies, clear and measurable and enforceable government policy on renewable energy. If you look at some of those countries where renewable energy is actually doing very well, you will discover that there's a clear policy by the government. For instance, the government of Kenya, they've set clearly a target of presenting so percentage of their energy requirement from renewable energy. No wonder they are doing well in geothermal, they're also doing well in solar. So, and if you don't have a government that will have this clear policy, you're going to have some challenges in convincing your banker to put money into those projects. The tariff structure is also an issue because yes, we discover over the years the cost of deploying renewable energy, especially solar, has been going down as presented in the earlier report, but you still find out that the cost per unit of electricity is still higher than what you have from the utilities. Yes, the projection is that in years to come, it will be a lot cheaper to deploy renewable energy compared to the grid. But as of today, you still have that cost has been high. And there should be what you call an off-taker agreement. For instance, if you are deploying an off-grid renewable energy, the community that you are deploying into should have an understanding. The government that is giving the land, or whichever agreement you want to put in place, there must be a confirmed agreement. And if you are selling to an utility company, your PPC, the power purchase contract, must be vetted properly to be sure that you are protected. I once had a customer who wants to produce energy and sell to what you call a distribution company in Nigeria. Now, the distribution company is proposing to buy at a cost that is lower than the cost of generating the power from this company. So from day one, it's already at a loss. So for that kind of a project, you will not find a banker that will support it. So there should be a way of incentive. That's why the government can come in. If the renewable energy company is generating an off-grid energy, say at maybe it's 25 cents per kilowatts, and the utility is willing to take it at 20 cents. What happened to the gap? So you have an issue there. But if you're selling your energy to a community and it's off-grid location, there must be an agreement in place before we get into the issue of financing. Let me go to the requirement for assessing credit. For most organizations and for most banks, the issue of assessing credit is about those issues we call the 5 C's of credit. These are the fundamental issues about assessing credit, not just for renewable energy, but for any area where you are trying to require for funding. But I will expand these 5 C's. I will not be speaking just about 5 items. I'll speak about breaking those issues down as it relates to renewable energy. You must be able to demonstrate that you have experience of success in handling deployment of renewable energy. You find so many people who want to come up and put in, say, a funding requirement for $1 million or $500,000, and yet you cannot show a success in a project of $100,000. So, first thing is this: let there be a record of success. If you don't have that record of success, tie up with someone who can give that experience and assurance to the bank that you have a record of success. Is absolutely important. Another issue is you must also ensure that you maintain a relationship with the bank. Most banks will look at you to finance you and say you have run your business for about 3 years. Some banks will say you must run your account with them for 6 months. You must have that. They must be able to verify where you operate from. They must also understand that you have a full understanding of the business. And one of the key things that banks will do is that they will do a background check on you that is borrowing and also on the key player. There must be no bad credit existing anywhere on your name. And then your companies should be able to show itself as being profitable over a given period of time. Then that takes me to the business proposal. There must be a sound, realistic business proposal. It shouldn't be speculative. We've seen quite a lot of projects in renewable energy space that when you crunch the numbers, they really do not make sense. And this is an area where things like the navigators, a whole lot of people who are in this field to be able to help move this field forward will be able to help a lot. For the company itself, There must be a clear shareholding structure, key background information, qualification, experience of the key players in that company. One other key issue is that what is the contribution of the project developer to the overall project? Quite a lot you see people want to borrow from the bank. You want to borrow, say, $100,000, and there is not even a $10 of you in the project. To make your project successful and to get a funding assurance from the bank, you must have your own skin in the game. If you don't have your skin in the game, it will be difficult for a bank to shoulder the responsibility of financing your project by 100%. There has been quite a lot of intervention by different agencies in coming to aid in this area. The technical support and affiliation is also a key issue. We've had some projects that bodies such as the Nigeria Energy Support Group, the RIP project, USAID, WindRock, and even what the Project Navigator, what they are doing, they come a long way in ensuring that even when this project is conceived, this project is not going to be left alone in the hands of the project developer, but there will be a hands-on training, capacity building, which has been explained. Capacity building does not stop in just sending the person to a training. It ensures that in the conception of the project ideas, in the presentation of the financial plans and the cash flow, and also on when the project is already running, you also have people who will be able to look at the project and help as the project is ongoing. And where this is for a grid, I've mentioned that there is a need for a PPC for a grid. If it's not for a grid, the commitment and agreement of the people is very important. Another issue is technical competence. For instance, and the technology you are deploying. You find issues in some areas where projects are deployed and then a particular item fails. For instance, maybe a battery that has a 2-year lifespan. After 2 years, the battery packs up. Is there replacement for this? Is there warranties in place for this? For most solar projects, yes, the PVs could have a lifespan of 20, 25 years. The inverter could have like 10 years. But the battery is a key component that could determine whether there is success or no success on this. And what you find out increasingly is that people tend to cut corners whereby instead of using a battery that can last for like 5 years, they use a battery that will last for barely 1 or 2 years. And when that happens along the line, what happened to the project? Is there a warranty in place between the project developer and the provider of the battery? For projects that have been successful, what you discover is that the developer actually have people with the original equipment manufacturers, so that if anything happens on those projects, that warranties comes into place. Make sure that a copy of the warranty agreement you have with the original equipment manufacturer is available to the banker. Once they have understanding that if this project, if this equipment should go bad, there is already a provision that this equipment will be replaced. Because if a particular equipment fails, critical equipment, if it fails, your ability to get your loan repaid will be jeopardized. Because if the off-takers are not getting the required power, what will basically happen is that they will stop paying, and then you have a bad credit on your hand. Now, I also mentioned the issue of project appraisal by experts and recommendation of the experts. For instance, for EcoBank, we work with WindRock. We're working with USAID. For every project we want to finance, we push them to WindRock to ensure to express their opinion about the project. And once they recommend the project, then that is the first point.
we will not even look at the cash flow, the project feasibility, or anything if we don't have that expert opinion, because we're not experts in renewable. Yes, we might know one or two things about it, but we must have that expert opinion about the project. We also have a Nigeria Energy Support Group. We have the RIP, Project Navigator. People like that should be able to express opinion about the project. The cash flow of the project has to be positive, and you have to have, when you sensitize the cash flow, which is one other thing that is very critical, if your project has been viewed by an expert, you'll be able to tell you that sensitizing the cash flow means that if the project, if things don't go as expected on the project, you have enough safety valves to ensure that this project continue to generate the cash flow to repay the loan. These are things that we must build into the project. And quite also, there are issues of collateral, security for the project. What we have done in EcoBank is work with some organization to ensure that this issue of security is not completely taken away from the customer, and that we are able to be flexible on the security requirement of this project. So you must be willing.
Mr. Olowo? Yes, Mr. Olowo?
Yes.
Just to understand, maybe we can provide you some question and answer. You know, we had a lot of questions, so maybe
Sure.
we can, let's say, move to the Q&A session, or you conclude, and we will conclude, have some conclusion by Roland, and then we will finalize, let's say, the webinar with the Q&A. Is it okay with you?
Okay, you can just give me a minute. I will just conclude. I will wrap up.
Please take a minute.
So the security requirement is absolutely important. I've mentioned quite a lot of, if you are doing an off-grid project, the infrastructure that has to be in place. The distribution infrastructure mostly, it tends to be much more profitable if the government is involved in the distribution infrastructure, while the project developer is involved in the generation infrastructure. But you could have a mix depending on what you're looking at. So these are the basic things that you require to be able to make your project profitable and to make your project bankable to the bank. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Olowo. A very nice presentation. I will now open the floor for questions. We've gathered a few questions from throughout the webinar, which we will now proceed to ask to our participants. There is one question for both Mr. Stickel and Mr. Olowo, which is, what is the failure rate of projects in terms of the projects that want funding and then fail to achieve the bankability required to achieve this funding? So maybe Mr. Olowo can answer first.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, but what is the what?
What is the rate of failure of projects that would like to get some funding, but they do not have the bankability required? What is in your experience the share of projects that do not comply with the necessary requirements?
The rate of projects that fail as a result of non-compliance with bankability.
Yeah. So
okay.
your perspective as the bank.
Okay, I may not be able to give the exact rate, but what happened, especially in this part of the world, is that you see a lot of projects out there which were done by, for public corporations, for government. You have, let me give you some example, street lighting projects where projects have been deployed and yet they are not working. So that sends a bad signal to the banks to say, oh, if this project is not this, then it's not working. So you have quite a lot like that, littered all over the place and are not working. You find also there's some projects that are working, not all of them are not working, but the reality is where you have one or two projects and are not working and the fund is out, what you will discover is that
you may not be able to have the required financing for subsequent projects if you have been putting once on a project. Personally, I've had projects that I financed that I'm running around to restructure and to ensure that, yes, the customer is able to, on an ongoing basis, make the required payments. But it's not about the project not being properly structured, but you find out that one or two things went wrong, and we're partnering to ensure that we get the project on track.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Olowo. So the same question applies for Martin Stickel. So you have a different perspective, and you come from a different region. So in your experience, from what you've seen, what is this rate of failure?
Yes, thank you. Actually, very good question, and very difficult to respond to. When we talk to project developers, I guess that maybe 10 to 30% of the projects that are being identified are realized at the end of the day. But of course, there's an early stage of project identification, the project idea, then it's throughout the project development process, projects get more and more specific, more and more concrete, where you talk about then the individual steps and securing projects and securing rights and selecting technology and so on and so forth, as outlined also in the Navigator. So that after the individual development stages, of course, decisions are being taken continuing with the project or stopping a project. So if a project has advanced throughout a number of the project development processes, say up to concluded pre-development, this is more or less the stage when most of the projects reach us as a technical advisor to banks and investors. From those projects, I would think that close to 90% probably are realized at the end of the day. Also because there is sometimes then a bit painful process when banks or we as their advisors discuss with the developers about possibilities to passing the hurdle by changing this, that or the other in the projects themselves, with risk allocation, with technology selection, with having partners with a certain track record involved, as Mr. Olowo just said. So I think from a more advanced stage, probably then 80 to 90% of the projects are being realized.
Thank you, Martin. Very interesting answer. I will proceed to the next question now. It's for Roland. So we saw in one of those slides that there are current auctions for PV that are as low as 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And we had a question which is asking, is this price driven by other factors such as green certificates, subsidies, or how do they get this low?
Mm-hmm. So these are pure cost figures. I think we very often, especially when we present these tender results for renewable energy projects, we see a lot of discussion afterwards. I think, let's say, we can state, and let's say the colleagues, my colleague Michael Taylor is doing work on the IRENA Costing Alliance, and this is the biggest database on renewable energy projects, also solar projects. And let's say from these results and from this database, we can say that especially solar projects are very competitive against fossil power fuels and fossil power fuel generation. But let's say the price you have, and especially looking on tender prices, you have to calculate also with system costs, and you have to look into the tenders of what kind of data, let's say, have been used, what is the kind of basis for the tender, and what figures should have been provided, and let's say to compare different projects, let's say in the size matters, then of course the investment level ongoing in a certain country matters. We have seen also in the IRENA Costing Alliance that the framework costs play a tremendous role. So what is the overhead in a certain country? And then you have to see also, for example, land costs may differ. So that may look different in the UAE as in a Greek island or whatever. So, and taking these aspects into account and looking into the details of a tender, you may come up to a variation of the costs for solar project, but nevertheless, the solar costs have come down a lot in the past years, and they are now competitive against fossil fuels. And the details is a matter of calculation from project to project and from tender to tender, looking into what kind of is the background calculation for a tender offer.
Thank you, Roland. I believe Martin Schigel also had something to say about this question. Martin? Can you hear us, Martin?
Yes, no, sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to briefly add to what Roland Rösch just said. We have been involved in this Dubai project and also in similar projects in the region. And of course, such tariffs are only achievable when a number of very positive parameters and characteristics of the project get together. One of us just mentioned the EPC price. Of course, EPC prices are only then so low and achievable if there is a very high interest of EPC contractors and the market to develop such projects. Then, of course, for financing, financing must be very low to achieve such tariffs. As in photovoltaics, you actually almost only have capital costs at the very beginning because there are no fuel costs as compared to to conventional power plants, and there's only very small percentage, say roughly between 1% and 2% or even a bit lower of the EPC price as annual operation and maintenance costs. So the perceived country risk and perceived project risk perceived by the banks and by investors must be very low in order to achieve competitive financing. And then, of course, the 800 megawatt in Dubai or the subsequent project in Abu Dhabi are two projects that are, let's say, highlight projects or projects that are perceived from the entire market, and everybody involved in the market has been keen to get involved in those, and this triggers then a high competitiveness together with the plain level field of already done site studies of available data, of an available grid connection, a lot of work that had been done by the utilities in the background.
Thank you, Martin. That was very interesting. I will make one final question for my colleague Simon. We had a question it's more specific. It's on the Navigator itself. So is the Navigator applicable for rural community projects and other off-grid projects?
So thank you, Carlos, for the question, and also for our attendees for asking this question. So the direct answer is yes. Navigator is applicable for, let's say, rural application and in the context of off-grid system. Of course, let's say that the guidelines of today are applicable, let's say, for large-scale project, but let's say looking at what people looked and requested, we have started to develop additional guidelines for two rural and let's say remote applications. So the first one is mini grids systems integrating different renewable energy sources like wind and solar, and also we're looking at solar home systems, and this is very important, let's say, to complement, let's say, the guidelines for large scale, which provide a pathway, let's say, for large-scale project to be developed, but of course some requirements are very different for those. So we look at providing also some tools, and in the context of rural community solar project, we have designed, and we'll share it very soon, a full performance model and financial model. So essentially, local developers will be able to have a kind of one-stop shop where they can have the knowledge and directly start to model and enter the values of the project. Very important for small projects where the overhead can be limited. Yeah, so this is the answer for this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So unfortunately, that is all the time we have available for questions. If you have a question that hasn't been answered during the session, we encourage you to get in touch with us, with the Navigator team, at the email that you see on the screen, navigator@irena.org. Before we conclude today, I would like to hand the floor to Roland for his final words, and then after that we will conclude the webinar.
Yeah, I would like to thank all the panelists for the contribution to this webinar. We had 560 registrations to this webinar, and in average we had 230 participants in this webinar, which is quite good figures. I would like to mention that we provide all the slides that we have shown here. The webinar itself will also be made available, that people who missed the opportunity to participate here have the possibility to follow this webinar again on YouTube. We will also let's say the Navigator and the materials on the IRENA Project Navigator as we presented it today, they are all available under www.irena.org/navigator, where you can just easily register with your email, and then you will have full access to all the materials and the studies and checklists and tools and the learning section and the do your project section and the financial navigator. Let's say, just to summarize what was said today, I found there were very interesting statements. So at the beginning, let's say a statement from our director Dolph Gielen was to meet the remap targets and visit the climate goals of the world. We need to develop about 18,000 solar projects. This is why we have, let's say, in the case of solar, taken the initiative with the IRENA Project Navigator to support the project development process worldwide. IRENA offers with the IRENA Project Navigator a 9-phase stepwise process to develop projects from project identification till the decommissioning of the project with tools, financial models, checklists, a lot of technical information to make a design and a concept for renewable energy technology concept that leads then into a financial proposal, and which can be then, let's say, in a framework of best practice, be in the next step implemented. At the moment, we have online the wind energy technical concept guidelines. The general guidelines are online. We have the utility scale solar available already, and we have the small hydropower projects available. But in the next weeks, accompanied by webinars as well, we will also put online the mini microgrids technical concept guideline, the rooftop solar technical concept guidelines, and we will also have the geothermal technical concept guidelines, which, as I said already, all will be introduced with webinars. We will let's say, and we have seen and learned from Martin Stickel, from Fichtner, that the experience they have as bankers and owner engineer has found its way in the Project Navigator, which now creates a better understanding of the technical requirements, bankability requirements for solar projects. It is a key thing, let's say, that the quality of projects and the quality infrastructure of project has to be developed to get the good access to finance. And let's say the Project Navigator, as stated by Martin Stickel, is a tool that can support the quality development and the quality infrastructure for such a renewable energy project. Mr. Olowo defined also and said, let's say, that it's very difficult to define standards of what makes renewable energy technologies and projects bankable. But let's say it's clear that a due diligence is very difficult to be done to get the access to financing for a renewable energy project. Mr. Olowo outlined that, let's say, the Project Navigator is a complete tool that gives a lot of guidance and hints of what are the key criteria to make renewable energy technology projects bankable. Let's say, apart from the technical aspect, Mr. Olowo mentioned also some assessment criteria. So he mentioned the experience of the project developer, also, let's say, the size of the project in relation to the experience. I would like to underline that we have a self-evaluation tool in the Project Navigator which you can use. This will give you a hint regarding your experience, regarding your background in relation to the project type and size you would like to develop, and if you are not fitting the requirements, let's say, to be bankable in such a context, our self-assessment tool will give you guidance in how to find partners and how to solve this problem of a lack of expertise to develop a big project. So check it out, look into our self-assessment tool. In the Financial Navigator, we provide a database that helps you to define and identify in an early stage of a project what kind of funds are available for renewable energy projects for certain technology in your specific countries, and it kind of helps you to fulfill the third point as mentioned by Mr. Olowo, build your relationship with the bank and, let's say, use the data you find in the Financial Navigator to create a relationship with your bank to get your project financed. Because, let's say, if you present a proposal just at the end of the process without interaction with the financing partner, this will be very difficult. We can support this with the Financial Navigator in the Project Navigator. A background check of the developer will be done, was mentioned by Mr. Olowo. Also, let's say, to work out a sound and well-prepared proposal is a key thing to access financing. This is exactly what we want to achieve with the Project Navigator. We would like to help you to put your knowledge, your experience, your insights in the project into a proposal that looks sound to the bank and may access financing. Also, and this is of course clear, let's say the bank will not take the risk to financing your renewable energy projects if you're not having an equity partner or if you're not put equity yourself on the table to show your commitment to the project that you have in development. This is of course a key thing. Also, let's say it was said from several angles, the capacity building element of the Project Navigator is a key thing. We provide with the learning section a lot of materials to train yourself on how to develop a renewable energy project, but the best learning in how to do a renewable energy project is just learning by doing. Develop your own project, check it out. Have a look at the IRENA Project Navigator under www.irena.org/navigator. Thanks a lot for your attention and thanks for participating our webinar.
Thank you, Roland. So that is all the time that we have today. I would like to thank all our participants for joining us, and I would like to give special thanks to Martin Stickel and Sunkan Miolowo for agreeing to be panelists in our webinar. If you wish to get in touch with the Navigator or with any of the speakers, please just email us at the navigator@irena.org.